right. This is the one game. So what you're going to do is you're going to put a paper plate on top of your head, and you're going to draw a picture of Robin pregnant.
It didn't end with a bang. It ended with silence. Not one breakup, but a slow unraveling. A family that once preached love and unity began to rot from the inside, one ignored tear, one cold shoulder at a time. Sister wives promised a spiritual bond like no other. But what we witnessed was a spiritual betrayal that left fans asking, was it ever real? This is the story of how a plural marriage turned into plural heartbreak. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't one explosion, one betrayal, or one walkout. No. The breakdown came slowly, quietly, like 1,000 tiny cracks spreading through stained glass barely perceptible at first. Until the whole window exploded for years, millions of us were glued to the Brown family on Sister Wives, thinking we were seeing something extraordinary, a spiritual marriage built on unity, trust and love that was going to transcend the boundaries of regular relationships. But behind the cameras, beneath the smiles, something else was happening, a quiet deterioration driven by control silence and secrets that just couldn't remain hidden forever, and caught yourself yelling at your screen, crying with Christine, or just wondering how the whole thing came apart so quickly. You're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what moment you believe changed everything, because today we're going to take a step through the collapse of what was once touted as a spiritual empire, and how through heartbreak and betrayal, the women of the Brown family discovered something they were never permitted to possess. Before their emancipation from the very beginning seasons of Sister Wives, there were already hints, little sparkles, that this so-called spiritual empire wasn't as harmonious or as balanced as it seemed Kody Brown was. At the center of it all, the confident, charismatic patriarch who claimed his plural family was founded on love and respect. But the more we watched, the more apparent it became that love, that respect wasn't being shared. Equally, not even remotely, let's begin with Meri. She was Kody's first wife, the legal one, the woman who was by his side before the cameras ever rolled, but it didn't take a long time for the viewers to realize something was amiss. Kody began to treat Meri like a distant cousin rather than a partner. There was that moment when she attempted to convey her isolation, her desire to be close.
Colleges really narrowed
And
it down
Kody
to
sat
2
stone-faced,
schools.
not
I'm
upset,
Kylie, I'm your tour guide. I'm
just
sure Logan
numb,
responded to the fact
as if the bridge between them had already been torched, and he wasn't keen on rebuilding, and recall she was the one who consented to legally divorce Kody so he could marry Robin out of respect for the family. She made the concession. But what exactly did she really get in exchange? Then there was Christine, always smiling, always cheerful in the early stages, but even then, there were fissures. One of the most insightful moments was when Christine confessed that she didn't want to be Kody's third wife, that it had felt contrived from the beginning. She discussed how she had expected romance and actual connection, and yet, Kody acknowledged on national television that he was not physically attracted to her when they wed. Can you imagine hearing that from your husband after creating a life and having 6 children together? It was cruel, and it was honest. In a way that made it clear Christine's pain wasn't new. It had been sitting there quietly for years. Janelle, the most independent of the wives, always kept her emotions close to the chest, but she too revealed the tension beneath the surface. She often chose to work outside the home, not just for money, but for space, emotional space, distance, from the dysfunction that was her way of surviving. And Robin? Well, from the moment she came into the family, the dynamic changed. Kody glowed around her. She became the favorite wife. Whether they admitted it or not, the other women felt it. You could see it in their faces. Robin wasn't just a new partner. She was a turning point, and everything began to change from there. Meri's betrayal wasn't just about a scandal. It was about loneliness. It was about reaching out for someone because she was starving for connection, The catfishing incident rocked the Brown family, but what most people didn't know at first was that it wasn't about the affair or the deception. It was about what brought her there in the first place. Meri was alone, emotionally abandoned. She said it herself. She felt hollow, like she didn't belong anymore. And instead of greeting her with compassion, Kody recoiled. He grew colder, less husband-like and more judge-like that moment when he sat across from her, arms crossed, and told her that their relationship was never coming back. It shattered something, not just in her, but in all of us watching. Because it wasn't just a marriage ending, it was proof that Kody could shut down, that he could emotionally detach completely when one of his wives became inconvenient. Christine saw it too, and you could feel her pulling away long before. She left. She started to pull away quietly, watching her. In those later seasons, it felt like she was living beside him, not with him. There was a moment, one that still weighs heavy, where she confronted Kody about their intimacy or lack thereof. And Kody's response, he told her he wasn't interested. No apology, no attempt to repair it. Just disinterest, and this wasn't new for her. She had spent years being the peacemaker, the one who kept smiling, even when her heart was breaking. But you can only smile through so much before you just stop. And when Christine stopped, when she finally said out loud that she didn't want to do this anymore, it wasn't just a decision, it was a reclamation. Janelle, as always, processed things differently, quieter, more measured. But don't mistake her silence for acceptance. She watched the favoritism grow, saw how Robin became the center of Kody's world, while the rest of them were pushed to the edges. She didn't make dramatic speeches or break down in front of the cameras, but her absence said enough. She started spending more time apart from Kody, making decisions on her own. She even admitted calmly and clearly that she and Kody didn't really have a marriage anymore, that it was more of a friendship. And when your spiritual husband stops seeing you as a wife, what's left? And through it all, Kody's reactions followed the same pattern: defensiveness, blame, and withdrawal. He rarely asked what they needed. Instead, he demanded loyalty, obedience, control. And the more they reached for independence, the more threatened he became. He couldn't see that the walls were closing in, not because of outside forces, but because of the choices he made, the way he loved selectively, the way he abandoned emotionally. What we saw wasn't just betrayal. It was a slow public unraveling of trust, intimacy, and connection. And each woman, in her own way, began to realize she deserved better. Christine's decision to leave wasn't spontaneous. It was a slow burn, years in the making, and we all knew it was coming. But when she finally said the words out loud on camera, it still struck like an earthquake after decades of struggling to make the plural family work, of putting on the brave face, raising kids in chaos. Being the fun wife, the cheerful one, Christine finally said, "I'm done." In the early seasons, Christine was committed. She was the one who believed the most in the vision of plural marriage. She wanted the big united family. She wanted the sisterhood. But over time, that dream became harder to hold on to, especially with Robin coming into the picture. Robin's arrival wasn't about a new wife. It was about a huge change in how Kody gave his attention. Christine began to notice it, and she said it bluntly. Kody was no longer emotionally available, and when CO hit, it only got worse. The distance between the wives wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Spiritual, complete. What broke Christine wasn't one moment. It was a culmination, watching her speak in her confessional's voice, calm but sad. She revealed how isolated she felt, how Kody stopped coming over, how he told her very clearly he no longer wanted an intimate relationship. And when she asked him why he wouldn't try to make things work, his answer was icy. "I'm not interested in having an intimate relationship with you anymore." That was it. Like it didn't even count, and in that moment, you could see it in her eyes. The hope was gone. She packed up his things quietly on purpose. She moved it into the garage, and when Kody stopped by and saw his things boxed and waiting for him, you could see the shock hit him like a wave. He hadn't taken her seriously. He didn't think she'd actually leave, but Christine meant it. She told him the marriage was over, that she was choosing happiness for herself, for her kids, especially for Truly, who was still young and didn't need to grow up in a house full of silence and sadness. Fans were shocked, but also cheering her on. Christine became something so much more than a reality. TV star in that moment, she became a symbol of choosing yourself, of refusing to settle, of breaking free from a system that no longer served her. Her departure was messy, emotional, raw. It shook the foundation of the Brown family, and Kody rushed to regain control, but he was too late. Christine's voice in her confessionals grew stronger, more confident. She said she didn't believe in plural marriage anymore, that it wasn't for her, and instead of shame, she stood in that truth, unapologetic, empowered, and when she moved back to Utah with Truly, it wasn't a retreat, it was a rebirth. She reminded so many women watching that it's never too late to start over, that even after years of devotion, you can still change your story. Christine leaving wasn't just the end of her marriage. It was the beginning of something powerful, the crumbling of the spiritual empire Kody had built, and the rise of women who were finally choosing themselves. Janelle was always the quiet force in the Brown family, not the loudest, not the most emotional, but solid. The one who kept things running while the others dealt with emotional highs and lows. Janelle stayed focused on stability, especially for her kids. But over time, especially in the more recent seasons of Sister Wives, we began to notice a shift, a quiet but potent awakening, and it was impossible to ignore. In the early years, Janelle was the one who put up with the most. She didn't expect romantic attention from Kody, the way Christine or Meri once did. She remained in her lane, parenting, finances, and just surviving. But when the pandemic hit, everything began to crack. The cracks in the family became more apparent, and Janelle, the one who had always shunned drama, began standing her ground. It began with the co-rules. Kody's rules were extreme and ever-changing, and instead of working with his wives, he dictated. But Janelle pushed back. She told him point blank. She couldn't kick her sons out of the house just to appease him. Her boys were grown, working, contributing, and she wasn't going to punish them just to make Kody feel more in charge when Kody tried to make her choose between him and her kids. She chose her children without hesitation. That moment was huge for someone who had always followed the rules. Janelle was saying no, and meaning it. Then came the loyalty tests. Kody wanted the wives to turn against Christine after her decision to leave, but Janelle refused. She said, "I'm with Christine." And you could feel the shift. This wasn't just about Christine's exit anymore. It was about Janelle waking up to the imbalance of the entire family dynamic. She saw Kody's anger, his favoritism, his inability to self-reflect, and she wasn't going to keep pretending it was okay. In one tense scene, Janelle told Kody they were acting like divorced people, and he didn't even flinch. That silence said everything he knew it too. But the difference now, Janelle wasn't afraid to say it out loud. Fans rallied behind her. She was no longer just the logical one. She was the one choosing peace over pretense and her loyalty. Once the glue that held things together became the spark that made her finally break free from a broken system. For years, Meri held on, even when the writing was on the wall, even when Kody made it painfully clear he was no longer emotionally or physically invested in her. She remained. She held on to the hope that somehow things might go back to the way they were, but there's only so long a person can keep reaching for a hand that's never reaching back. Meri's heartbreak wasn't sensational. It was subdued. It appeared in the spaces between her sentences, in the way she smiled through tears during confessional interviews. She didn't get the dramatic departure like Christine. There wasn't the big blow-up. Instead, it was years of gradual breakdown. The marriage that had once been founded on mutual dreams and strong trust had devolved into something empty. And Kody ceased pretending. He said more than once that he didn't feel married to Meri anymore, and that cut deep, despite that Meri hung on until she didn't. Later on, we saw her accept the truth not begrudgingly, but with a kind of weary dignity on social media. And during the tell-all specials, she acknowledged it. Simply, there was no relationship left to salvage. The spiritual marriage was over. She was finished waiting for someone who had emotionally left the room years prior. And when she finally released, it wasn't to get attention. It wasn't to prove a point. It was to reclaim her peace. She stopped living in the shadow of what might have been and began walking into what could be on her own terms. And in that quiet, powerful choice, Meri found her voice once again. After all the betrayal, silence, and public heartbreak, she chose hers while the rest of the family came apart. One relationship remained untouched. Robyn and Kody. In fact, it became stronger, more visible, and more exclusive. And that exclusivity alienated not just the other wives, but revealed the lie at the center of their so-called unity. From the beginning, Robyn was presented as the final piece of the puzzle, someone who would round out the family. But with the passage of time, it became apparent she wasn't a piece of the puzzle. She was a wedge season after season. Robyn professed she wanted the family together, that she never wanted to be the favorite. But what we saw didn't align with the words. While Janelle wrestled with money and Christine struggled with abandonment, Robyn had Kody in her physical, emotional, and financial life. She had his attention, his affection, and as fans witnessed during the co-years, his protection. The rules Kody imposed on the family were drawn from Robyn's home, not a group decision. And although the other wives stood alone literally in separate houses, secluded, Robyn's house was the refuge. Kody even stated in an interview that Robyn was the sole one who was obedient, a statement which cut deeply through any illusion of equality remaining. Robyn's tears in interviews portrayed her as the heartbroken peacemaker. But the truth was more brutal. She wasn't building bridges. She was getting all the support while the others sat silently watching their marriages break apart. Her vision of togetherness seemed to mean everyone orbiting around her and Kody's decisions. And that image of family was never going to work, because real unity isn't established on hierarchy. It's established on mutual respect. And by the time the other wives realized that clearly it was too late, the empire had already begun to crack, and Robyn stood in the middle of it. All the fall of Kody's spiritual empire wasn't simply the end of a patriarch. It was the ascension of the women who had been silenced, ignored, and overshadowed. And while cracks began to form in his world, it wasn't simply about the family's dissolution. It was about the individual awakenings that followed Christine Janelle. And even Meri started to find their voices, taking back their power in ways that resonated with viewers, and perhaps with themselves. Christine's decision to leave Kody was monumental, not only for her, but for all women who've lingered too long in draining relationships. Her willingness to walk away and take a life that was hers, apart from the control of her marriage, became a rallying cry. Her confessionals were full of raw truth about her needs, her pain, and her path to freedom. And it wasn't simply about leaving Kody. It was about taking back her right to be willing to be respected and to be independent. Janelle's transformation was quieter, but no less significant. Observing her move from being a passive member of the family unit to an active voice, particularly during the pandemic and the financial hardship, was empowering. In every sense, Janelle may not have screamed her independence from the rooftops, but in her own quiet way, she claimed it. She stood firm and reclaimed her story, making it clear she would not let Kody's neglect define her any longer. And then there's Meri. Her tale is the one that tends to get lost, but her heartache and ultimate acceptance of the reality that her marriage no longer existed in any positive sense is compelling in its own right. For years, Meri hung in there, attempting to make it work, but in the end, she let go not only of Kody, but of the notion that she needed to remain in a relationship that was nothing more than a memory of what it could have been. Her choice to walk away was heartbreaking. But it was also an act of self-love. It was an insistence on refusing to carry on living in emotional isolation. In the end, what we witnessed wasn't merely a breakdown, it was a reclaiming. These women discovered their independence, their power, and their voices. They were no longer merely the wives of a man who dictated their every step. They became women with agency, with choice, and with the ability to forge their own lives. So I want to know from you, what do you think about the journey these women have taken? What does it mean to you when a person leaves a situation that no longer benefits them? Leave your comments below and don't forget to subscribe. This channel for more in-depth dives into the realm of sister wives and beyond the journey of independence is never simple, but it's one to be celebrated.